12a in the Tractate Berachot, וקוראין 10 דיברות שמע והיה עם שמוע ויאמר אמת ויציב ועבודה וברכת כהנים. The priest in the Beit HaMikdash, in the temple, they have part of daily routine of different ritual. One of them was saying every single day the 10 Commandments. Also saying Shema and blessing of the Kohanim, the priests. So here, Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, Af בגבולין ביקשו לקרוא כן, אלא שכבר ביטלו מפני תרעומת המינים. Which means, originally speaking, they want to do it also outside of the border of Beit HaMikdash, which means they want to do, the Rambam explained to us, they want to do it in a daily basis, to read the 10 Commandments. Why? Because that's the foundation of the Torah. One of them is the 13th principle of faith. Part of those principles involved in the foundation of Torah, which is the Aser Dibrot. They speaks about the Torah as a foundation. But the reason it's because the Yerushalmi explain, Ela Amar, the reason is because mipnei ta'arovet haminim. It was those heretics that said that the only part that God transmitted to us was the 10 Commandments, and the rest is interpretation or rabbinic. Even to this very day, sometimes you hear from people who said, oh, what the Jews receive is only the 10 Commandments and the rest is the interpretations. So therefore, if you emphasize the reading of the 10 Commandments as part of the daily routine, daily ritual, it's like in a way you strengthen those opinions. So they erase that part, they take it out of the daily routine. Also outside bigvulin, outside of the Beit HaMikdash. תניא נמי אחי רבי נתן אומר בגבולין ביקשו לקרות כן אלא כבר ביטלו מפני תערובת המינים. You all the same that they stopped it because of them. רבא בר חנא סבר למקבענו בסורה. It was a city called Sura, very heavily involved with Jewish learning, and they want to do the reading of the 10 Commandments, a daily prayer, daily. אמר לרב חיסדא כבר ביטלו מפני תרעומת המינים. The same happened because some people were heretics, they remove it. The same here, they said, Ameimar, it's another name of Rabbi, סבר למקבענו בנהר דעה. Part of the exile, there is a central of Jewish learning. One of them was a city called Nahar De'ah. So they want to have these 10 Commandments as part of the reading there. Amar le-Rav Ashi, the same story. Rav Ashi responded, he said, כבר ביטלו מפני תערובת המינים. So the same way that they want to reinstitute the reading of the 10 Commandments in Nahar De'ah, and the great sages of just generation, Rav Ashi, they avoided it. ובשבת מוסיפים ברכה אחת למשמר היוצא. We learned earlier in the Tractate Tamid that on Shabbat they add another bracha for the watch for the shifts that left. So they said, "Amar my bracha achat." What type of the single bracha they made? אמר רבי חלבו משמר היוצא אומר למשמר הנכנס. The end shift said to the new group of the shifts of the priest, said, מי ששיכן שמו בבית הזה הוא ישכין ביניכם אהבה ואחווה שלום ורעות. The one above who dwell and bring peace to this house of worship, he will bring upon the new shift love and togetherness and peace as well. Okay? מקום שאמרו להאריך. We said in the Mishnah that the place that the sages institute is a lengthy blessing, you cannot shorten it. So they said pshita, it's simple, it's obvious. היכא דקנקית קסא דחמרא בידי וכסבר דשיחה הוא הובטח מברך הדתא דשיחה וסיים דחרמה יצא. If someone hold a cup of wine in his hand and he thought that this is a real wine, and he thought that is real wine, so he make a bracha, he make a blessing accordingly, which is the blessing Boreh Pri Hagafen, blessing for the wine. Okay, now what happened is he suddenly he realized that it's sheikhar. For example, it's beer. So for beer, you said the blessing of she'akol niya bidvaro, right? Even it contains some alcohol, but you say she'akol. And then when he bring it close to his face, v'siyem b'dechamra, and suddenly he realized that it's wine. So he finished the bracha Boreh Pri Hagafen, okay? So he said yatsa, he fulfilled the mitzvah. Ve'iname im amar she'akol niya bidvaro yatsa. Remember what we said about the Eved, if you said she'akol, so you fulfill. Tnan, we learned that Nan al kulam im amar she'akol niya bidvaro. We said, it's also in the Gemarah later in page 40, that if the bidiavad, if there are circumstances you're not sure and you said she'akol for some reason, so if you said she'akol niya bidvaro on anything, yatsa, even lechatchila there are different brachot, but if you made it, they have the koach, the blessing of she'akol, to fulfill the obligation of the blessing. So therefore, if he returned and he said the proper blessing for the wine, he fulfilled his mitzvah anyway. The hatna, the ela, heicha de kanakit kasa de shachar beyadei. But what happened if you hold the cup of wine in his hand, v'kasavar de chamro, he thought that it's wine, upatach ubarich adata de chamra, and he's beginning his blessing because he thought that he's holding wine, and then he realized, oh, it's not wine, it's what? It's liquor, it's whiskey, it's other good stuff, right? And siyem b'shechra, so he finished with she'akol. Mai, since at the beginning we considering the mindset is very important. Beginning he thought that it's wine, because if you look carefully at the blessing, especially if you look at the kiddush, the blessing, you see it's a long bracha, and you start with a certain way, asher kiddishanu b'mitzvot v'ratzavanu, etc., etc., and then you end in Mekadesh HaShabbat. But at the very beginning you start Baruch Atah Hashem, blessed are you God, and you finish Boreh Pri Hagafen. So even it's not Shabbat, even it's during the week or a party or whatever reasons, you're about to say Boreh Pri Hagafen, Baruch Atah Hashem, blessed are you God, and you're thinking that it's a wine, and suddenly you realize that it's not wine, right? So he said, what's the proper? If he began Baruch Atah Hashem and he thought that it's wine, and suddenly he realized that it's not, Batar Ikar Bracha Azlinan or Batar Chatima Azlinan? Do we go by the essence of the blessing, since you said most of the bracha, Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech HaOlam Boreh, suddenly you realize that it's not a wine, so we go by the all kind of the majority, the essence of the blessing, which is the land, or Batar Chatima Azlinan, or we go by the end, the last word is Pri Hagafen. So how you solve it, which way you go? Tashma, we bring another brighter to prove it. Patach beyotzer or v'siyem b'ma'ariv aravim lo yatsa. You know, in the morning you said God created light. Now you are in the evening time, and by mistake you start the blessings in the morning blessing instead of the evening, and then you finish the bracha ma'ariv aravim. God that created also the darkness, the eve. So he said you did not fulfill the mitzvah. Why? Because it's the evening times and you start with Yotzer Or. פתח במעריב וסיים ביוצר אור, יצא, but if it's the opposite way, you fulfill the mitzvah, right? ערבית, פתח במעריב ערבים וסיים ביוצר אור, לא יצא in the evening time, if you do that, you finish יוצר אור, you do not fulfill. פתח ביוצר אור ויצא במעריב ערבים, יצא, כללו של דבר. So in general, what do you learn from all of that? הכל הולך אחר החיתום. That we understand that everything go by the way you sealed it. The way that you end, that's the way you go by all these brachot. So since we talk about Birkot HaKenenim, if you have derived any joy, so you said the same thing. You remember we talked when we speak about Ne'ilah, we said Akol Olech Achar HaChitum, that the importance of the focusing and concentrating on the end of the Yom Kippur service, that's the conclusion, that's the very end, the Chitum, the time of sealing. So the sealing of the bracha, in that sense, is the Gefe. So we said, Shane Atam, the Ka'omor Boruch Yotzei HaMeorot. In the evening you said, Baruch Atah Hashem HaMa'ariv HaRavim. So because it's a long bracha, so it's different. But in a short bracha, like Shehakol or Bore Pri Agafen, you may say that because part of that it's not right, so the whole bracha is invalid. So here we divided between the blessing of the light, like Me'orot, to the blessing of Ne'enim, that you derive joy, that it's that all the blessing of the light is Baruch Atah Hashem Yotzer HaMeorot. So it's a full bracha by itself. But here it's different. Why? Hanicha lerav de'amar kol bracha she'en ba'azkarat Hashem ena bracha. This according to Rav who hold that any blessing that you don't mention God's name, it's not considered bracha. So therefore when you use the word Yotzer or, the God who created light, you have the name of God, Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech HaOlam, Yotzer or, right? So it's a full bracha. Ela le Rabbi Yochanan, but if you go by the Rabbi Yochanan, the Amar that he said, Kol bracha she'en ba malchut ena bracha. If you do not mention God, Master of the universe, Elokeinu Melech HaOlam, so it's not considered bracha. So therefore, the Birkat Yotzer Or, what do you say in Yotzer Or? Baruch Atah Hashem Yotzer HaMeorot. You don't say Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech HaOlam. You just said Baruch Atah Hashem Yotzer HaMeorot, which means you don't mention the God is the kingdom, right? So he holds that if you don't mention the kingdom of God, it's not considering a separate bracha. My Ika Lemeimar, how he divided between the Birkat HaNehenim, that you derive joy, and the sealing of Birkat HaMeorot. So he said that even Rabbi Yochanan it's considering a proper bracha. Ela kevan damar Rabba bar Ula, kedei lazkir midat yom balayla midat layla bayom. Anytime you mention the trait of the night, it's also the day and the day at night, which means, you remember we said the rules that it was a night, it was a day in the creation. Remember that rules that we said that the Jewish day start with the night, the eve before, always. So when you mention darkness, you already mentioned the upcoming lights. It's always also in a spiritual sense, whether it be of the darkness or the word darkness, it's beginning of the dawn. So in that sense, he said, because the bracha or malchut me'ikara atravayu kamar, because both of them apply to both, so therefore it's all considering as one. So which means Rabbi Bar Ula said, but when you mention creating of darkness during the day, you basically incorporate both. Okay? So when you start the blessing with Malchut, with the King of the universe in the beginning, both day and night, it's okay. So in other words, you cannot bring a proof from Birkat HaMeorot to Birkat HaNe'enim. So you can bring another proof. Said another proof is Tashma miseifa. Look at the end of that braita. Klalo shel davar hakol olech achar hachitum. What we said, the rule, it's always go by the end, the sealing of the blessing. Klalo shel davar. What does that mean? General statement for all these rules. What does that mean? La tuye mai. What do you learn from that? La da tuye hada amaran. What we is not to express what we about to say, that it's in any circumstance, regardless if it's a long bracha or short bracha, it's all go by the seal of the bracha. Lo, la tuye nahama vetamrei. This derived the idea of eating bread and eating date, which means after eating bread you have birkat hamazon, that it's long grace after meal, and after eating date you make bracha me'ein shalosh, this different bracha specifically for after eating date. So anyone make a mistake in those two brachot, we always go by hakol olech achar chitum. What's most important is the way that you seal the bracha. But the Gemarah, the Gemarah said, what does that mean? How do you learn it? If you said that he ate bread and he thought that he is eating date, and therefore he began with the blessing with the mind that he is eating date, and he finished as he ate bread. That is exactly our problem here, right? The same as the question we asked earlier about the wine and the beer, and the response is lotnit tzricha. You don't. The reason for that is because kigon de'achal tamrei, when he ate date, vekasavar denahama, that he thought is a bread, achal upatach benahama, and he began with the bread, vesiem b'detamrei, and he finished with the date, yatsa. If you ate date and you thought that it's a bread, and you begin with the bread and you finish with the date, you fulfill. Afilu siyem benahama, name yatsa. Even if finish the way that you finish with the bread is also fulfilled. Ma'itama, the tamrei name meizai zainei. You learned in several Gemarah, you learned the Gemarah in Eruvin, the other Gemarah in Bava Kama, they talk about the date, that it's also sustainable in a very serious way. So if someone ate and he make a birkat hamazon the same as you make a grace after meal for bread, even lechatchila you shouldn't do that. But if by force of circumstance, but the avad you did it, you fulfill the obligation. And therefore we said akol olech achar chitum, that everything go by the way you seal. So in conclusion, what we understand, that in regard to a question in the blessing, that part of the blessing it's inappropriate, it's incongruous to the other part, it's unsolved. So what we understand so far? We understand that the problem is, at the beginning we said, if you begin your blessing with your mindset, a certain bracha that you do not yotze, it is not fulfilled, if it's okay or not. So one proof is that yotze or. We rejected that. We said that yotze or begin with the full blessing. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam yotze or. That's the essence of the blessing. So we rejected that rejection. We said according to Rabbi Yochanan, the end is not a full bracha, because you said Baruch atah Hashem yotzer ha'morot, but you don't say Elokeinu melech haolam. Then you rejected that, and you said that because you mentioned the Amidah, the essence of day and night, that the beginning of the blessing and the end, it's incorporated as one blessing. Second source. Second, we said, in general, we go by the seal of the blessing. Ikar achitum. The end, it's the kush. So we ask a question about bread and date. Okay? So it's like the first question, and we rejected it. We said, in a date and the bread is exceptionally a situation that we cannot solve the general question. So in conclusion, in both sources, the one who rejected can prove that it's not full resolution to our original question. You want to ask me something? Yes.
Suppose we're not sure about what we're eating or drinking. Suppose it's bread with dates or vodka mixed with orange juice. Okay? Would it be appropriate to take as a generic blessing, because it says, we learned in a Mishnah later on, on all food items, if one says the blessing through whose word everything came to be, your obligation is
I would say for the vodka mixed with orange juice, you'd absolutely say shakol, because that would be the case for both of them. As far as bread with dates in it, I would say you say amotzi.
Right. But, I mean, in a lot of cases, saying that particular blessing with b'diavad, maybe more exactly for something like date bread, you have to take at least 2 blessings, maybe. Once, if you knew it was date bread, say the blessing for dates, and let's say for fruit that includes dates, and I'd say the blessing for bread. 2 separate blessings.
I need to have a book, halachot on Berachot, and that addresses that as to what point does bread become a cake, and you say Borei minei muzonot as opposed to hamotzi, and it depends on how much fruit is in it and other things, and I don't have the exact answer, but it is in the book.
Shulchan Aruch in Reish Tet, 209, they have a discussion. It's a very heavy controversial issue, because you have to divide between several components. Just give you the mindset.
Right.
One is the kavanah. What do you have in your mind when you hold it? Then is the taste and the essence of the food. It's a very broad subject.
Okay, so for example,
in general, we don't rule at the first stage to say shakol over everything. That's not the way we look at things in halacha.
Okay, so
shakol resolution is absolutely b'diavad.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
By force of circumstance.
And even that b'diavad not apply to every case all the time.
Right. So, for example, if you have date mixed in with bread, you have to make a decision if it's a date bread or if it's really a cake. And it goes partly, let's say, if it tastes more sweet than bread would.
I'll give you a different example.
Then you consider it to be cake.
It's a very good point.
And I'll bring that book in tomorrow, and because it actually discusses that specifically, so I'll bring that in tomorrow to show it to Bruce, because it's a very good book on that.
You want to say something?
Oh, so what about a complicated dish that had rice and meat and dates and things like that in it?
I'll be Jewish. I answer with a question. What happened, like we have the rabbinical school Chavruta program, and you have those pizza.
Okay.
So if you pay attention, those rabbinical students, some of them wash hands and do a motzi, and some of them hold that mezonot, and they don't wash.
Sephardim do always hamotzi.
Mitzay perot, opposite.
Opposite. Sephardim always do
not all.
Borei minei.
Even now in the Sephardim, it's a different movement in that sense. But it's a big question about the essence of that mitzay perot. For example, you see sometimes even in the roll bread, when you go to Brooklyn, you see it a lot. You have those roll breads that you have a stamp mezonot, and not everyone agree with that. That it's like considering a cake, even it looks like a challah roll, small challah roll. And many rabbis hold that if you kovea seuda, if you make it as a meal, you should make a motzi for that. But as I said, it's a very big question when it comes to the mitzei perot, that is have some type of juice meat. So as I said before, this is a broader subject. In very general, we have a rules that we have a specific bracha to everything, and shakol, it is good for water, it's good for certain things, but in general we don't rule by covering everything just by saying shakol. That's not the way we look in halacha. It's only b'diavad. Okay.
Do some people actually say 2 or more blessings over one particular dish or drink?
Okay. When it happened, you do 2 as an example. It's a good point. I just share with you an example. Let's say you make a meal, like a regular seuda, regular meal, and suddenly, unexpectedly, somebody come and serve you with a delicious fruit. Pick and choose a delicacy, right? You go to London market, you see all these special delicacy stores that bring from around the globe, right? It was unexpected, and they serve you with that fruit during the meal. You already wash your hands, you do a motzi, you do everything like for a regular meal. Since it was unexpected, right? And it's a big question if it's part of the expected seuda or not. Davar, it's like come to the meal, so therefore you have to make a separate bracha. For that, can be bore priya adama, bore priya etz, depend on the product.
But now also, as I understand it, is when we actually learned about this during our chavruta, is when you say if you're eating a meal where things are actually separate, like if you have vegetables separate and so forth, then you can say a bracha for each of the foods. If you're eating a sandwich, which is, you normally would not disassemble a sandwich to eat pieces of it, you would eat it as a sandwich, then you only say amotzi for the sandwich. You don't pull out the tomato and say,
so I ask you a question, if that's the case, what happens if during the meal they serve you with apple sauce? You see small tiny pieces of apple in the sauce, and they serve you unexpectedly during the meal.
Is that sauce or is it apple?
Good question.
That's
so they
question.
have people like the Hasidei Kur, the Gemarah Hasidim, that they make a bora priya etz for that apple sauce. Not everyone go along with that, but there are some who does make a separate bracha for that. Omar Rabba בר חיננה, סבא משמי דרב. כל שלא אמר אמת ויציב שחרית ואמת ואמונה ערבית, לא יצא ידי חובתו. Now we return to the discussion and the blessing of Kriyat Shema. So Rabbi בר חיננה, he said, from the name of Rab, whoever did not say at the beginning of the bracha of Kriyat Shema, Emet v'yatziv, you know, that's followed the Hashem Elokechem Emet, kissing the tzitzis, right? Or Emet v'emunah in the evening. So he did not fulfill his obligation. So the Meiri elaborates on that, and he said that it's all connected. So he explained that all the exile, it's like a darkness, it's Laila, it's night, and the time of the redemption is like a day. So in the night we remember the emet ve'emunah, the faith is expression at night, that we believe that the redemption will come soon. But today, that the day, it's a reminding of the geula, of the getting out of suffering. So that's a emet ve'yatziv, that it's like remembering the kindness that God bring upon us. So Rashi here explained that all the connection between emet ve'yatziv, it's a past, and emet ve'emunah, it's present and future. But anyway, he said that one has not mentioned that he's not fulfilled his obligation. שנאמר להגיד בבוקר חסדך ואמונתך בלא תנסם for Shabbat 92, we said we should mention in the morning your kindness, and the evening is the side of faith. Another thing, you remember always the rule, if you mention one rabbi's memra, you mention others. ואמר רבא בר חיננה סבא משמי דרבא מתפלל, כשהוא קורא, קורא בברוך, וכשהוא זוקף, זוקף בשם. When you pray, you bow down when you said Baruch, right? Ata, and then you stand up when you said Hashem. When you mention Shmuel, it's another name of Rabbi. He said Amar Shmuel Maitama de Rav. What's the reason of the Rav? Dechtiv Hashem Zokef Kefufim. So he said that when you mention the name of Hashem, Shmuel is a colleague, a friend of Rav, that he have a length of life after him. So he find a implication, because they said that in the Psalm 146 they said that Hashem strengthened and strengthened those who bend themselves. So the same, we said that in the morning Zokef Kefuvim, that Hashem strengthened. The same here, you should strengthen when you mention that. Meiti v'mipnei shmi nichathu. They said in the book of Malachi in chapter 2, because of the name, I should be a person should subjugate himself to God and should not stand. So that looks like contradiction. So he said Miktiv Bishmi, it's written my name. What it's written is Mipnei Shmiktiv. The way that it's written that before you mention the God names, you bend yourself, you show that you are subjugate yourself when you mention God's name. Okay? So Amar le Shmuel Echia Barav Ba'u Yan. He said that you as somebody who is a very knowledgeable person, Ta ve'emalach milta le'al maravuch. Come as someone who is a Torah scholar. I'll tell you something on the name of your father. I heard from your father. That's exactly what I heard from your father. כשהוא קורא בברוך. When he bend, he should bend his baruch. כשהוא זוקף, when he stand up, זוקף בשם, he should stand up when he mention God's name. רב ששת, כי קרא כחיזרא, right? When he bent like a stick that it's like one time without delay. Ki kazakev zakev kechivra. When he stand up like a snake, like a scorpio. If you look at the snake, the way it stand up is like, you know, not in one time. Is the snake stand up slowly, right? Because it's like show that you have the awe of God all the times. So some rabbis, the Geonic rabbis, the Rabbi Saadia Gaon and others, explains that Chizra, here when you use the word Chivra or Chizra, it's either a throne or it's like a bamboo a tree that it's like 3 meters throne, and it doesn't mean that its entire body, it's just the head should be bent, that it's like show the humbleness, lack of haughtiness. Okay? Rashi explained that it should not look like you pray because it's a burden on you. ואמר רבא בר חינן המשסה במשמי דרב, כל השנה כולה העם מתפלל הקהל הקדוש. מלך אוהב צדקה ומשפט, חוץ מ10 ימים שבין ראש השנה ויום כיפורים, שמתפלל המלך הקדוש והמלך המשפט. That's a very important halacha. We studied it many times, that the difference between the 10 days between Rosh Hashanah until after Yom Kippur, you have to mention God kingdom. So therefore the whole year when you do Amidah, you said Hakel HaKadosh. When it's come to the 10 days of repentance, you mention Hamelech HaKadosh. ורבי אלעזר אמר, אפילו אמר הקהל הקדוש יצא, שנאמר ויקבע השם צבקות במשפט, והקהל הקדוש נקדש בצדקה. Isaiah said in chapter 5 that he used the name Hakel, is one of name of God, not Hamelech, the king. So therefore it's fine, but that's not the halacha. The halacha is you have to mention Hamelech, especially for the first 3 blessings. מתי ויקבע צרף שפעות במשפט? When God, his throne is a time of judgment, great. אלו 10 ימים, that's the 10 days, שמראש השנה ועד יום כיפור. Between 10 days וראש השנה ויום כיפור. וכאמר הקהל הקדוש מה היה ועלי. If someone by mistake said הקהל הקדוש, what's the הלכה? אמר רב יוסף, הקהל הקדוש הוא מלך אוהב צדקה ומשפט. רבא אמר, המלך הקדוש והמלך המשפט והלכתה כרבא. So basically, the first one of Yosef said, as long as you mention Hakel HaKadosh ve'melech ohev tzedakah mishpat, it's fine, but that's not the halacha. The halacha is going by the rabbah, that you have to say Hamelech both at those days. So in very general halacha, they said that if you made a mistakes in the first 3 seconds, yeah, like you said the word Shalom Alecha Rabbi Umori is several seconds, you recall it, so you can repeat, it's fine. But if you pass that time period, you have to go to the beginning. However, when it's come to Amelech HaMishpat, or Melech Ohev Tzedakah or Mishpat, since you mentioned the word Melech, so by force of circumstance you can continue on. So again, on the 10 days, in a certain Yemei Tshuva, Hakel HaKadosh, if you say Hakel HaKadosh instead of Melech HaKadosh, and you realize later, you have to go for the beginning. But if it's the Melech HaMishpat, since you mentioned the word Melech, it's okay. It's not the way it should be, but it's okay. ואמר רבא בר חינא בסבא משמי דרב, כל שאפשר לו לבקש רחמים על חברו ואינו מבקש נקרא חוטא. He said if someone can ask for God compassionate and mercy on his fellow and he's not doing it, he's considering a sinner, which means you know someone is wrong and you should pray that he should make teshuvah and change his way. But if you don't do that, it's a problem. Why? Because you see about the Samuel, that after he rebuked and admonished the people very strongly, he said in the beginning of Samuel, Gam anochi chalila li michato la'Hashem echado litparel ba'aradchem. Even I see that you are a sinner, I will not commit the sin by stop praying for you. אמר רבא, אם תלמיד חכם הוא צריך שיחלה עצמו עליו. He said, if he's a Torah scholar, he should make an extra effort to pray for others and worry. And what's the source? My tama, if you tell me that that's a source from the first book of Samuel that said in chapter 22 that he saw that Saul, as a Torah scholar, people should worry about his condition. it's not the really source. Why? Dilma Melech Shani. Maybe you said that because you worry so much, it's because he was the king of the people. And because of that, it's different. Ela mehacha v'ani b'chalotam levushi sak. When King David prayed for his enemies, Doeg and Achitophel, all these enemies that was basically Torah scholars, he said in Psalm 35 that he put his sack and garment and he prayed for them. So in other words, if you see people who are Torah scholars that they are doing something that's wrong, you should have extra worry and you should fast and put this extra prayer that they should be healed from that. If someone is very embarrassed, he did something very wrong, and he feels very embarrassed over that, right? So they said that his sin is forgiven because he has rejected that sin, and the Riaf explained that because of that, that embarrassment is already part of his atonement, right? Shenemar, because they said in the book of Ezekiel, chapter 16, they said, Leman tizkiri, because you remember, Ezekiel talked to the nation, uvosht, and you embarrassed, velo elachot pitchon pen, you don't open your mouth, mipnei klimatech bechapri lach lechol asher asit neum Hashem Elokim, because I forgive for what you did, the name of the Lord. Dilma tzibur shami, so maybe you say that that's all because it's a public and not individual, ela mehacha, but the source is from here. ויאמר שמואל אל שאול אמר גזתני לעוד אותי ויאמר שאול צר לי מאוד ופלישתים נלחמים בי והשם שר מעלי ולא ענני עוד גם ביד הנביאים גם בחלומות ויקרא לך לא דייני מה אעשה. That because you remember the story of Saul, that he was in a very high level of depression, he was isolated, didn't know what to do, so he went to that psychic and she brought the special seance, the special process, she brought the soul of Samuel, and Samuel said, what are you doing? Why you call me from my grave? So it's not the right process. But he doesn't use the word of breastplate. So why? He said mishum dekatle leno v'ira kohanim. So because King Saul was very embarrassed that he made a mistake and killed in the city of Nob all the priests. So because of that sin, he was embarrassed and he was very embarrassed himself. And how do you know that King Saul was forgiven for his sins? Because Samuel said to him in chapter 28, he said, Vayomer Shmuel Shaul machar ata ubanecha imi, which means he said tomorrow, which applied to afterlife. Samuel said, you and your sons will come together with me. So he said, Amar Rabbi Yochanan imi bimchitzati. Rabbi Yochanan said that imi, it means it's not just that you passed away, you're no longer among the living very soon, but you will be among the righteous, meaning that Samuel told Saul that your sins are forgiven. When you will pass, that will be the end of your agony, and you will be among the righteous in afterlife. V'Rabbanan Amrei, by the sages bringing another source that King Saul was forgiven for his iniquities. Mehacha, from the sentence as follows. They said in the second book of Samuel, chapter 21, they said, "V'hoka'anum la'Hashem begiv'at Shahul bechir Hashem." That the Givonim said to David, bringing to us 7 people, and we should, get rid of them in the place called Giv'at Shaul, the hill of Saul, and that he was a chosen person, chosen by God. So it means that the Givonim was angry at Saul, but yet they call him Bechir Hashem. So how come they use Bechir Hashem? It's not one of the words that the Givonim use. They have to say Yatz'a bat kol. This is one of the Midrashic Bamidbar Rabbah. They said it. Yatz'a bat kol is a voice from heaven came and finished their sentence by saying Ve'amra Bechir Hashem. That is, the voice said that Saul is the chosen by God, which means that his iniquities was forgiven and he's among those absolute righteous people. So I just want to conclude with word of halacha. The Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim is said in the Kuf Yud Gimel and 113 as follows, and I'm reading the words in Shulchan Aruch. He said, "Kshekore korea achat ubimihirut, mishtadel lichfov gam et rosho." When a person bow down, he should bend not only his knees, but he should also bend his head as a sign of haughtiness and humbleness before God, and basically fulfill what we said earlier, Kara de Chizra, both by the Rashi and the Geonim, because when he is standing up, he's doing it like a snake, slowly, 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 and it's all we learn from Rav Sheshet, because that's the way he approved it. So again, bend the knee, put his head down, and then he slowly, like a snake, put his head up. So it's an act of humbleness. I just want to remind you that the 12b, we have a separate session that we call it for the 12b.
I